Hi friends, this is Caitlin. Today we're going to make a mermaid box card. So I'm going to be using the out of the box dynamics from My Favorite Things along with some of their heavyweight tropical teal cardstock for our base. And then my images are all from Sweet November stamps. So I'm using the little mermaid wheeze. They are so stinking cute. They're called Mer-Wees. That's their actual name. So I'm going to use this one that's like waving. I'm going to bring in some of these other fish and little critters. The background scene, I'm going to be using the under the sea horizon lines. And then my sentiment is coming from this mermaid hair stamp set. I love it so much. So before we jump in, go ahead and hit that subscribe button now so you can come and hang out with me every Friday for some crafty inspiration. And we are going to jump right into building our card base. So this is a box card that folds flat and fits in a regular standard A2 envelope. So that's the end card dimensions are 5.5 by 4.25. But it sits up perfectly on its own. And I will tell you right now, I messed up, and you only need to cut 2 of either the skinny or the larger window pane ones that I have up here in the upper left. You don't need both. So I wasn't thinking when I was cutting these out. So now I have the card base parts ready to cut one that has bigger sides whenever I'm ready to do that, because I ended up just using the skinny side so that more of my background would be seen in the back of the card. So I also cut 2 of these inserts out of some Nina Desert Storm cardstock and a stitched sentiment panel also from Nina. And I had 2 scraps of my Studio Katia heavyweight acetate, which I love for using in something like this. I don't like it personally for my shakers. It's a little too firm, but for adding 2 characters to make them look like they're floating up out of these box cards or any kind of interactive card like this, I love this acetate. So if you've been considering if you need it, or if you want to do these kinds of scenes where a character or an image is kind of floating or flying or swimming or whatever, and you don't want to be able to see the stick holding it up, Studio Katia acetate, I've had it for probably over a year, and I don't use it all the time, but when I do use it, it has yet to let me down. So I stamped my sentiment onto that little stitched die cut that may your day be filled with more bubbles than troubles, just in black ink. And I stamped my little mermaid and a seahorse that we're going to pop up on that acetate. And I am getting my scene situated. It took me a minute, guys. I'm going to be honest with you. When I sat down to make this card, I was not feeling super inspired in general. I didn't really have a direction. I kind of knew I wanted to make a box card in general, and I just started rifling through my stuff. And I don't know if you know or have heard of Mer-May, but Mer-May is an international crafty thing that people celebrate the month of May by making mermaids, and Sweet November Stamps specifically has a passion for Mer-May, and we always have a new mermaid release coming, and it's one of the happiest times of my like card making journey through the year. It's like number 1 is Halloween and number 2 is Mer-May. So I was just feeling super inspired by the Sweet November mermaid images that I already own. So I wanted to go ahead and make one of those today just to get you guys excited, because there is going to be a Mer-May release again this year, and we just saw the previews and I cannot explain to you the cuteness that is coming. There's always some elegant mermaids, there's always something really cutesy, there's always great background builders, but this time I really feel like Amy stepped it up. So I'm just throwing that out there. I'm starting by coloring in my little Mer-Wee with some kind of a little bit more of a tan than I normally go for. I added in this E37 to really bump up her shading, and of course she had to have blushy cheeks, and I'm gonna have all of the markers listed down in that description box below for you guys. It is a lot because this is a full scene card, basically just split up into a box card. It was very coloring heavy, but for me, sometimes when I am at a loss or I'm not feeling super inspired, it's nice to just sit and color, and that's kind of how this card and scene came about for me. So I hope that you appreciate and understand that feeling. I wanted to get a little bit crazy and give her some very colorful hair. So I grabbed teal markers that I thought went really well with the teal that I'm going to be building my box card out of. Just going in with my darkest shade to add in all those details and then blending out to my medium and lighter shade. And then going back one more time with the darkest, just like I did on her skin tone, to really reinforce the shadows and the definition there and help make those colors really pop. So if you ever feel like, if you are someone like me who blends darkest to lightest, and you feel like by the time you get to your lightest that the darkest has been washed out a little too much, know that you can always go back in and add a second layer. Honestly, you could add a second layer of all three shades, but I prefer to go in with a second layer of just the darkest with a very detailed, gentle touch, and it gives you a lot of that definition and shadow back into your coloring. Now, I can't do a mermaid tail these days without adding in some stipples to give it that scaled, textured look, so I did that for my mermaid. And then it was time to start on my background scene. Now, when you see this card head on, you don't see the very bottom part of this scene, but because it is a box card and it's three-dimensional, and in theory someone would be displaying it once I send it, you can see the bottom part when you're moving around, or if you look at it from just a little bit above. So I do think that it is worth it to color the whole scene in, even if from straight ahead in your pictures you might not be able to see all of that detail. Your recipient is going to see and appreciate it. I went in with some very light BG markers, adding in my darkest colors at the bottom towards the ocean floor, getting lighter as I went up. And I found that just kind of doing these streaks of starting with all of my darkest color and then making dark streaks, then blending over those with my medium color and then creating medium streaks up through the water. This just kind of gives a nice ombre, and because the streaks are there on purpose, I don't have to worry about getting the world's softest blend, because we want there to be ripples and kind of that tide feel of the water, and that you can kind of see the sunlight rippling through. I think it works, especially in a scene like this where there isn't a ton of space in between because we've built out those two pillars. I love these background builders, the under the sea background with these two pillars. They're super long. I've made slimline cards with this set as well, and A2, mini slim, all of them at this point. And I love that you can use one or both, and you can really anchor in your scene. And once they're stamped, that's it. I love that it's just one or two stamps. There's also a center floor section if you really wanted to widen it out, but I love that there's no masking involved with these, right? I just stamped them down, added my little fish in the top corner, and we were good to go. So I went in with browns, the E40s that I thought would match closest to my Desert Storm cardstock, because those are going to be the sandy panels, kind of shells up in the front of our scene, where our Mermaid and Seahorse are going to get added onto. So it's not an exact match, but it's definitely close enough that when you see it all together, it makes sense. I went in with some warm grays for the rocks and this little cave. And now I'm going to start going in and coloring in the kind of sandy, rocky levels above that. You could make these all rock. You could make them bright and colorful like coral. I really wanted the actual like coral and plant looking pieces in front to stand out, so I just decided to make these the same color as my sand. I don't know if that's how the ocean really works or not. It doesn't really matter to me. And I went in with the same fluorescent green for this kind of seaweed that I did in the mermaid's hair, so it looks like she kind of just plucked a piece out and added it to her little bun. And that's my kind of girl, to just you just make a craft bun right there with whatever you've got around you, and you're ready to do some work. So I had a lot of fun using a lot of really bright greens on the seaweed at the top, and just to kind of further contrast that, I added some true greens and a little bit deeper shades to the seaweed down at the bottom with the rocks where maybe the sunlight isn't hitting as much. I really wanted to pull in the same kind of orange pink tones that I had used in my Mermaid and some of the yellow from the Seahorse. So I brought in those same orange colors to shade in this coral. And then on the opposite side, on that big, large piece of coral, we're going to bring in some of those RV hot pink markers to match with my mermaid's tail. And something like this is really fun because there's no wrong way to color this kind of image. And mermaids in general, that's one of the things that I love so much about mermaids and fairies, is it's really anything goes. Who's gonna argue with you that it's not the right way to color a mermaid or a fairy? I don't know about you, I have not seen many in real life to compare it to. So the freedom there just really makes me happy. Like, they can have teal hair, they can have a blonde hair, they can have whatever makes you happy in that moment is what you can give them. So I brought in one last BV combination for this cute little fish who's kind of just like too busy minding their own business up in the corner. I added in some stippling dots on my sand, and I added the same shades stippling to my two sandy inserts, again, just to help bring them all together without having to go super in depth on shading and a ton of coloring, just kind of breaking up that craft tone using the dark, medium, and light markers. They'll dry back a little bit too, and then my final step for that is going in with a white gel pen just to add some little white speckles, almost like little broken shell pieces, and then it was time to start assembling. So this is the moment when I realized that I had cut too many pieces. I'm starting out by just adhering down my main scene panel to the main backer panel. And if you wanted to make this more like a true card, you could always add like an extra panel or just start writing directly on the back of that panel. And that would be kind of where your personal message would go. So I took those two larger sections away, and we just need these two skinnier ones. We're just folding right along the score lines. I think My Favorite Things did an amazing job with this die set. It is so easy to use if you're paying attention to what size you need. So I adhered my sentiment on with liquid glue so I would have time to make sure it was straight. And I'm just going in with some really thin score tape to adhere it, using this dollar store little picker to make sure that my tape is fully pressed down, and then use the pointy part to pick off the backing tape. If you are like me and you have gel or acrylic nails, you know the struggle of peeling off backer tape. So that is definitely a tool that I use quite often. This is me making sure that all of my measurements are correct and that this is a true A2 size card, and I didn't need to adjust kind of where this back panel sits, and it is. So I am adhering it right to the bottom, and you can see there how we're going to be able to fold it flat and yet it still stands up perfectly. I'm adding in my shelves one at a time, and I am going to peel off the backer tape for the backer paper for my tape on both sides, but I'm adhering one side, and then I will lay my card flat and adhere the other side down. That is the easiest way that I have found to do this, so that you know that everything is still squared up and is going to sit the right way for everything to fold. And in between each step, I make sure to fold my card over and make sure that everything is still laying nice and flat both directions, so that no matter how my recipient folds it or moves it, we're good to go. I decided to fussy cut out my little mermaid and my seahorse, and because they had some little details kind of coming off of them, I left a tiny white border, which I didn't mind, but I just didn't want it to be white. So I went in with one of my BG markers from my background kind of ocean coloring, and I just shaded in that white section, and it makes it disappear enough that it's not distracting at all from the card once they're inserted into the scene. So I glued the the My Favorite Things die set comes with these tabs that you can cut to add all of your items and characters into your scene. So I cut one of those from the very beginning, and I adhered it to the back of my mermaid with liquid glue, and then I added some of that same score tape to the front of the tab, and this is just going to give me something to anchor her down with. I'm going to repeat that same process using a strip of that acetate, gluing my little seahorse down with just some dot runner, and then adding the score tape to the front of my acetate sheet, tearing that off and getting that situated on that second shelf, just so that they have a little bit of dimension and extra interest to them. You could add as many little characters and details to the scene as you want, but I had so much going on the background scene that I didn't want to completely cover it up. So my last addition are these really cool clear bubbles that are brand new from This Calls for Confetti. They come in a bunch of different sizes. I just use the smallest and kind of second to smallest, and I'm going to add some of these bubbles to the sentiment and then a few in the background just above the mermaid. I just love how cool these are, and it just gives that extra little touch of shine and dimension. So that is this card all completely together. For the fact that I sat down at my desk having no idea what I was going to do or where to even start, I am in love with how this one turned out. I hope that you are inspired to try something bright and colorful and make something this weekend that makes you smile. I am so grateful that you came to hang out with me. I hope you have the most amazing week, and until next time, happy crafting.